25 Forgotten Household Hacks. Only poor families knew, and they actually worked. Do you remember when every penny counted and nothing went to waste? When families got creative out of necessity, they discovered ingenious solutions that modern convenience has made us forget. Today we're exploring 25 household hacks that poor families relied on for generations, tricks that actually worked better than many products we buy today. Let's start with using vinegar as a cleaning agent. Long before specialized cleaning products lined grocery store shelves, vinegar was the Swiss Army knife of household cleaning. A gallon jug cost mere pennies in the 1950s, equivalent to about 50 cents today, and it could handle everything from grimy windows to stubborn mineral deposits. Families would mix 1 part vinegar with 3 parts water in old spray bottles, creating an all-purpose cleaner that cut through grease on stovetops, removed soap scum from bathtubs, and made glass surfaces sparkle. The sharp smell dissipated quickly, leaving surfaces not just clean but naturally disinfected. Many households kept separate vinegar solutions, stronger for tough jobs like cleaning the oven, weaker for daily countertop wipes. What made this hack so brilliant wasn't just the cost savings, though a bottle of vinegar could replace dozens of expensive cleaners. It was completely safe around children and pets, unlike the harsh chemicals that would later dominate the market. Even today, professional cleaners often return to this simple solution because it works just as well as products costing 20 times more. Repurposing old clothes for rags. Before paper towels became a kitchen staple in the 1960s, worn-out clothing had a second life as cleaning rags. Every family had a rag bag, usually kept under the kitchen sink or in the basement, filled with cut-up shirts, torn sheets, and threadbare towels. The process was almost ritualistic. When Dad's work shirt finally gave out at the elbows, Mom would sit at the kitchen table with her scissors, cutting it into precise squares. Cotton was prized for dusting, flannel for polishing silverware, and terry cloth for heavy-duty scrubbing. These rags weren't just for cleaning either. Soft cotton pieces became baby wipes, wool scraps turned into pot holders, and the best pieces were saved for applying shoe polish or furniture wax. A single old bedsheet could yield 20 or more cleaning cloths that would last for years. Families would wash and reuse these rags hundreds of times, hanging them on the line to bleach in the sun. This practice saved the average family about $50 per year in 1955 money, roughly $500 today. The irony is that these cloth rags actually cleaned better than paper towels, absorbing more liquid and scrubbing more effectively without falling apart. Boiling potato peels for soup. During the Depression and well into the 1960s, potato peel soup was a staple in poor households across America. What seems unthinkable today, eating what we throw away, was ingenious survival cooking. Families would save potato peels from a week's worth of meals, storing them in a covered pot in a cool place. Come Sunday, those peels would be thoroughly washed and boiled with an onion end, carrot tops, and whatever vegetable scraps were available. The resulting broth was surprisingly nutritious, as most of a potato's vitamins are concentrated just under the skin. Adding a ham bone or bacon ends transformed it into a hearty soup that could feed a family of 6. Some households got creative, adding barley or rice to make it more filling or thickening it with a flour roux. The practice wasn't just about poverty, it was about respect for food. Grandmothers who lived through the Depression would say that throwing away potato peels was like throwing away money. Interestingly, modern nutritionists have confirmed what these families knew instinctively. Potato skins contain more fiber, vitamins, and minerals than the flesh itself. Using baking soda as a deodorizer. A box of baking soda cost just 5 cents in 1950 and could solve dozens of household problems. Families discovered that this humble powder could neutralize odors better than any perfumed product. They'd sprinkle it in shoes at night, especially Dad's work boots, and shake it out in the morning. A small dish placed in the refrigerator absorbed food odors, replaced monthly for mere pennies. Carpets got the treatment too, sprinkled before bedtime and swept up in the morning, taking pet odors and mustiness with it. Mothers would add a tablespoon to diaper pails, cutting the ammonia smell dramatically. Even ashtrays got a bottom layer of baking soda to minimize cigarette odor. The science behind it was simple but effective. Baking soda neutralized both acidic and basic odor molecules rather than just masking them. Families often bought it in bulk bags from farm supply stores, where 10 pounds cost less than $1. This single product replaced what would today be dozens of specialized deodorizers costing hundreds of dollars annually. The practice was so effective that many luxury hotels still use baking soda as their primary carpet deodorizer, reusing tin foil. Aluminum foil was treated like silver in households where every penny mattered. After covering a casserole or wrapping leftovers, families would carefully smooth out the used foil, wash it gently with soap and water, and hang it to dry. Some households had a special drawer just for folded, used foil sheets organized by size and condition. The really good pieces, barely creased, were saved for company dinners. More worn pieces became pot scrubbers or were crumpled into balls for scouring cast iron. During World War II, this wasn't just thrift but patriotism, as aluminum was needed for aircraft production. Even into the 1970s, many families continued the practice. A roll of aluminum foil in 1960 cost about 39 cents, equivalent to nearly $4 today. By reusing each sheet 3 or 4 times, a family could make one roll last 6 months. Children learned to unwrap their lunch sandwiches carefully, folding the foil and bringing it home in their pockets. This meticulous care seems extreme now, but it represented a fundamental respect for resources that defined the era, making homemade shampoos and soaps. Before the beauty industry explosion of the 1960s, many families made their own hygiene products from basic ingredients. Soap making was a yearly event, often done outdoors in large kettles. Families saved bacon grease and beef tallow all year, storing it in coffee cans. Come soap-making day, usually in fall, they'd mix the fat with lye made from wood ash and water. The process was dangerous. Lye could cause severe burns, but the resulting soap lasted a family all year. For shampoo, different recipes circulated through neighborhoods like treasured secrets. One popular formula mixed 1 egg yolk with a tablespoon of lemon juice and a teaspoon of olive oil. Another used diluted Castile soap with a vinegar rinse. Some families discovered that baking soda mixed with water cleaned hair perfectly, followed by an apple cider vinegar rinse for shine. These homemade products cost pennies compared to store-bought versions. A bar of commercial soap in 1950 cost 10 cents. Families could make 20 bars for the same price. More importantly, these products were often gentler on skin and hair than their commercial counterparts, which were loaded with harsh detergents, turning old bread into croutons. No bread ever went to waste in a thrifty household. When loaves started going stale, creative cooks transformed them into dozens of different ingredients. Croutons were just the beginning. Day-old bread was cubed, tossed with saved bacon drippings or butter, mixed with garlic powder, and toasted in the oven. These homemade croutons had more flavor than anything from a box and cost nothing extra. But bread's second life went far beyond croutons. Stale slices became French toast, bread pudding, or stuffing. Dried completely, they were ground into breadcrumbs for meatloaf and casserole toppings. Italian families made panzanella, soaking hard bread in tomato juice and olive oil. Jewish households created bread kugel. Even moldy spots were cut away and the good parts salvaged. During the Depression, bread coffee was made by toasting bread until almost burnt, then steeping it in hot water. A single loaf could stretch into ingredients for 5 or 6 different meals. This resourcefulness meant that while Americans today waste about 40% of their bread purchases, earlier generations wasted virtually none. Repurposing old jars for storage. Glass jars were gold in frugal households. Every pickle jar, jelly jar, and mayonnaise jar was carefully washed and saved. The garage or basement workshop had rows of baby food jars nailed by their lids under shelves, holding screws, washers, and small hardware visible at a glance. In the kitchen, larger jars stored flour, sugar, rice, and beans, keeping them fresh and pest-free. Mason jars weren't just for canning. They became drinking glasses, flower vases, and lunch containers. The really nice jars, like those from specialty mustards or preserves, were saved for giving homemade gifts. Families would fill them with home-canned goods, cookies, or soup mixes as presents. Before Tupperware parties took over suburbia in the 1960s, glass jars were the primary food storage solution. They were free, lasted forever if not broken, and didn't hold odors or stains like plastic would later. Some families accumulated hundreds of jars, organizing them by size and shape. The practice was so ingrained that many Depression-era adults could never throw away a jar, even decades later when they could afford proper containers. Making homemade candles. Every bit of candle wax was saved in thrifty households, stored in old coffee cans until there was enough to make new candles. The process happened on the stove, melting accumulated wax stubs in a double boiler. Families made wicks from cotton string, braided and dipped in salt water to help them burn evenly. Molds came from anything: milk cartons, tin cans, even sandboxes for fancy-shaped candles. During the 1950s, when electricity was still expensive and unreliable in rural areas, homemade candles were essential backup lighting. Even in cities, families kept homemade candles for atmosphere and economy. Birthday candle stubs went into the wax can, as did the remnants of romantic dinner tapers. Children helped by crayoning designs on plain candles or adding dried flowers to the wax. A pound of paraffin wax cost about 15 cents in 1955, but families rarely bought it, surviving entirely on recycled wax. These homemade candles might not have been perfectly straight or evenly colored, but they burned just as well as store-bought ones costing 10 times more. Reusing toothbrushes for cleaning. A toothbrush's retirement from dental duty marked the beginning of its most useful life. These small brushes reached places nothing else could: the groove around the sink drain, the tracks of sliding windows, the crevices in jewelry. Every household had a collection of old toothbrushes in various stages of wear, each designated for different tasks. The newest retired brushes cleaned shoes, working polish into leather creases. More worn ones scrubbed tile grout or cleaned typewriter keys. The rattiest brushes tackled the dirtiest jobs, cleaning the car battery terminals or scrubbing garden tools. Some families marked them with nail polish or notches to distinguish cleaning brushes from current dental ones. Before specialized cleaning tools flooded the market, these repurposed toothbrushes solved problems that would later require expensive specialty brushes. They cleaned sewing machines, removed dirt from carved furniture, and even groomed pets' faces. At 25 cents each in 1950, a toothbrush was an investment that paid dividends for years after its original purpose ended: making soup stock from leftovers. The stock pot was the heart of a frugal kitchen, perpetually simmering on the back burner. Every bone from Sunday's roast, every carrot top, celery leaf, and onion skin went into that pot. Chicken carcasses were prized, simmered until the bones were soft enough to crumble. This wasn't just about stretching food, it was about capturing nutrition that would otherwise be lost. The resulting stock was liquid gold, rich in minerals, leached from bones and vitamins from vegetable scraps. Families would strain it weekly, using the liquid for soups, gravies, and cooking rice or beans. The strained solids went to chickens or into compost. Some households maintained a perpetual pot, adding water and scraps daily, creating a complex flavor that developed over months. A good stock could transform the cheapest ingredients into satisfying meals. Plain rice became risotto, stale bread became stuffing, and tough meat became tender stew. Before bouillon cubes conquered American kitchens, this homemade stock provided the flavor base for countless meals, costing nothing but the gas to simmer it. Using salt to keep food fresh. Before refrigeration was universal, salt preservation kept families fed year-round. Meat was packed in salt boxes, vegetables were fermented in salt brines, and fish was salt-cured for storage. The technique required significant salt, sometimes equal weight to the food being preserved, but salt was cheap and the results lasted months. Families would buy pork shoulders when prices dropped, coat them heavily in salt, and hang them to cure into ham. Cabbage was shredded and salted to make sauerkraut in large crocks. Even eggs were preserved in saltwater solutions called water glass. The salt drew out moisture, creating an environment where bacteria couldn't survive. This wasn't just Depression-era necessity. Many families continued salt preservation into the 1960s because the flavors were superior to frozen foods. Salt-cured country ham had a depth that no fresh ham could match. Home fermented pickles and kraut had probiotics that store-bought versions lacked. A 50-pound bag of salt cost about $1 in 1950 and could preserve hundreds of pounds of food. Stretching meat with fillers. When meat was the most expensive part of any meal, creative cooks learned to make a little go a long way. A pound of ground beef that might serve 4 became food for 8 with the right additions. Breadcrumbs, oatmeal, or crushed crackers were mixed in, along with an egg to bind it. Grated vegetables like carrots, potatoes, or zucchini added bulk and moisture. The mixture was seasoned heavily to maintain meat flavor throughout. This wasn't just for meatloaf. Hamburgers got the treatment too, formed thin and cooked carefully to hold together. Some families had specific ratios they swore by: 1 pound meat, 1 cup breadcrumbs, 1 egg, and 1 finely chopped onion could make 8 decent-sized patties. During particularly lean times, the ratio might be reversed, with more filler than meat. Casseroles were another stretching technique, where a small amount of meat flavored a large dish of noodles, rice, or potatoes. These techniques saved the average family $10–15 per month in 1950s dollars, about $150 today, while still providing protein-rich meals. Growing herbs in windowsills. Fresh herbs were an expensive luxury in grocery stores, if available at all, so families grew their own on sunny windowsills. Small pots or even tin cans with drainage holes held parsley, chives, basil, and thyme. These herbs transformed simple meals into something special. A few basil leaves made plain tomato sauce taste restaurant quality. Fresh parsley brightened any dish and provided vitamins during winter months. The initial investment was minimal. Seeds cost pennies, or cuttings were shared between neighbors. With proper care, a single parsley plant could provide garnish for months. Some families got creative, growing herbs in old coffee cans, painted and decorated by children. Others built small shelf units across kitchen windows, creating herb gardens that also provided privacy. The practice wasn't just economical. Fresh herbs were often impossible to find in grocery stores before the 1970s. Having them at hand meant the difference between bland and flavorful cooking. A window herb garden could save $2–3 weekly on store-bought dried herbs. Significant money when the average weekly grocery budget was under $20, making do with leftover fat. Every drop of fat was precious in frugal kitchens. Bacon grease was liquid gold, carefully poured while still warm into coffee cans kept by the stove. Chicken fat was rendered and saved, beef tallow preserved. These fats replaced expensive butter and oil in cooking, adding incredible flavor to everything they touched. Vegetables roasted in chicken fat, eggs fried in bacon grease, and biscuits made with saved fats had richness that modern low-fat cooking can't replicate. Beyond cooking, these fats had dozens of uses. Mixed with flour, they became roux for gravies. Combined with lye, they became soap. Spread on bread during lean times, they provided calories when butter was unaffordable. Families even used clean fats to waterproof boots and condition leather. The coffee can of bacon grease by the stove was so universal that it became a cultural symbol of American home cooking, creating homemade ice packs. Commercial ice packs didn't exist for most households until the 1970s, so families improvised with remarkable creativity. The simplest method was wetting a sponge and freezing it in a plastic bag, creating a flexible ice pack that conformed to injuries. Others filled rubber gloves with water and froze them, with the fingers providing ice for small areas. Some families discovered that frozen bags of peas or corn worked perfectly, staying flexible while cold. For longer-lasting cold, they mixed 1 part rubbing alcohol with 3 parts water in sturdy bags. This mixture stayed slushy when frozen, perfect for sprains. Cloth bags filled with rice and frozen provided gentler cold therapy. These homemade versions often worked better than commercial ice packs because they could be customized. Need something small for a black eye? Freeze a wet washcloth. Something for a larger area? A frozen wet towel worked perfectly. The cost savings were significant. Commercial ice packs cost $3 or $5 in 1960s money, while homemade versions cost pennies and could be refrozen indefinitely. Turning old curtains into new clothes. Fabric was expensive and precious, so worn curtains got new life as clothing. Those cheerful kitchen curtains became a daughter's summer dress. Heavy drapes transformed into winter coats. The fabric was often higher quality than what families could afford new. Those 1940s bark cloth curtains were virtually indestructible. The transformation required skill, but saved enormous amounts. A child's dress requiring 2 yards of fabric would cost $3–4 in materials in 1950. Made from old curtains, it cost nothing but time. Mothers would carefully disassemble curtains, wash the fabric, and use newspaper patterns or trace existing clothes. Feed sack fabric was similarly prized. Flour and animal feed came in printed cotton sacks, specifically designed to be repurposed as clothing. Some companies even printed patterns that aligned when multiple sacks were sewn together. This recycling was so common that wearing curtain clothes carried no stigma. In fact, a cleverly made dress from beautiful curtain fabric might be envied. The practice continued well into the 1960s, only declining when cheap imported clothing made new clothes affordable for most families. Reusing tea bags. A single tea bag served multiple cups in budget-conscious homes. After the first steeping, the bag was carefully placed on a saucer to dry. The second brewing required longer steeping, but still produced acceptable tea. Some families maintained a small bowl of used tea bags in the refrigerator, combining 2 or 3 for a pot of weak tea. But tea bags had life beyond the teapot. Dampened used bags soothed tired eyes, reduced puffiness, and helped heal minor burns. They cleaned and shined leather shoes, removed odors from hands after handling fish or onions, and fertilized houseplants when buried in the soil. Black tea bags helped darken gray hair between expensive dye jobs. The tannins in tea cleaned mirrors and windows streak-free. During World War II, when tea was rationed, families might get 4 or 5 uses from a single bag. A box of 48 tea bags cost about 39 cents in 1950. By reusing them, a family could stretch that box for months instead of weeks, saving several dollars annually when every penny counted. Fixing leaky roofs with tar. Professional roof repair was beyond most family budgets, so fathers became amateur roofers with buckets of tar. A 5-gallon bucket of roofing tar cost about $2 in 1950 and could patch dozens of leaks. The process was simple but effective. Clean the area, apply tar liberally, and sometimes add fabric or metal patches for reinforcement. On flat roofs, families spread tar with old brooms, creating new waterproof layers. For shingle repairs, tar was heated and poured into cracks. Some mixed sawdust with tar for better adhesion. During dry weather, entire families would spend weekends tarring roofs, knowing that one good application could last several years. The work was hot, messy, and dangerous, but a leaking roof meant ruined possessions and potential structural damage. These DIY repairs saved hundreds of dollars. Professional roofing cost $300, $500 in 1950s money. Many homes went decades with nothing but tar patches holding them together. The patches might have looked ugly with their black splotches against weathered shingles, but they kept families dry and saved money for more pressing needs. Making DIY air fresheners with citrus. Before aerosol air fresheners conquered American homes, families created natural alternatives that smelled better and cost nothing. Orange and lemon peels were never thrown away immediately. Instead, they simmered on the stove with cinnamon sticks and cloves, filling homes with welcoming scents. During holidays, this potpourri might simmer all day, creating atmosphere while humidifying dry winter air. Dried citrus peels were placed in closets and drawers, keeping clothes fresh and deterring moths. Some families made pomanders by studding oranges with whole cloves, creating decorative air fresheners that lasted months. Lemon peels cleaned and deodorized garbage disposals, cutting boards, and microwaves once they arrived. The oils in citrus peels also made excellent furniture polish when rubbed directly on wood. This practice saved money while avoiding artificial fragrances. A can of commercial air freshener cost 49 cents in 1960 and lasted perhaps a month. Meanwhile, citrus peels from fruit the family was eating anyway provided free, natural fragrance year-round. The house smelled like real fruit and spices rather than synthetic approximations. Using vinegar to soften clothes. Before fabric softener was invented in the 1960s, vinegar performed the same function for pennies. A half cup added to the rinse cycle cut through soap residue, leaving clothes soft and static-free. Unlike commercial softeners, vinegar didn't leave chemical residue or artificial fragrance. It was especially effective on towels, restoring absorbency that soap buildup destroyed. The acid in vinegar also helped set colors in new clothes and removed yellowing from white fabrics. Families discovered that vinegar eliminated odors that washing alone couldn't remove. Cigarette smoke, mildew, and perspiration. For heavily soiled work clothes, they'd soak items in vinegar water before washing. Some added essential oils to vinegar for light scenting, though most preferred the clean, fragrance-free result. A gallon of vinegar cost about 30 cents in 1950 and could soften hundreds of loads. When commercial fabric softeners arrived, costing $1.50 for perhaps 20 loads, thrifty families stuck with vinegar. The practice was so effective that many people returned to it during the environmental movement of the 1970s, discovering what their parents had always known: reusing buttons and zippers. The button jar was a treasure chest in every frugal household. When clothes wore beyond repair, buttons were carefully cut off and saved. Good zippers were removed with seam rippers and stored flat between cardboard. These notions were worth saving. A card of 6 buttons cost 25 cents in 1950. A zipper, 35 cents or more. Over time, families accumulated impressive collections. Mason jars filled with buttons of every size and color became resources for mending and crafting. Children learned to sew by sorting and stringing buttons. When a shirt lost a button, the jar yielded a close enough match. Sometimes entire sets of beautiful buttons transformed plain homemade clothes into something special. Zippers were even more valuable, carefully matched to new sewing projects. A good metal zipper could outlast several garments. Using leftover coffee grounds. Used coffee grounds had too much value to throw away. Gardens received the bulk of them. The nitrogen-rich grounds made excellent fertilizer for acid-loving plants like tomatoes and roses. Worked into soil, they improved drainage and attracted beneficial earthworms. But grounds had dozens of other uses. Mixed with soap, they became an abrasive hand cleaner that removed garage grease and garden dirt. Rubbed on furniture scratches, the brown color masked damage on dark wood. Placed in refrigerators, they absorbed odors better than baking soda. Some families dried grounds completely and reused them as fireplace kindling. Others mixed them with water to create brown dye for crafts. During the Depression, extremely poor families even rebrewed grounds for second coffee, weak but better than nothing. The practice made economic and ecological sense. Americans consumed billions of pounds of coffee annually, creating mountains of grounds that were pure organic matter. A pound of coffee cost about 75 cents in 1950, getting multiple uses from the grounds stretched that investment. Modern gardeners pay premium prices for coffee grounds that earlier generations got for free. Creating homemade draft stoppers. Winter heating bills drove families to creative solutions, and draft stoppers were among the most effective. Old socks or pantyhose were stuffed with sand, rice, or sawdust and placed against door bottoms where cold air crept in. Fancier versions used sewn fabric tubes filled with dried beans or cedar shavings for pest control. These simple devices could reduce heating bills by 10–15%. In homes heated by expensive oil or coal, this meant saving $5 to $8 monthly during winter, significant money in the 1950s. Some families made elaborate draft stoppers that became decorative elements, shaped like animals or covered in needlepoint. Others used rolled newspapers tied with string for temporary solutions. Windows got similar treatment with rope caulk or rags stuffed in gaps. The materials cost nothing: sand from the yard, sawdust from woodworking projects, worn socks beyond darning. Yet they solved a problem that modern weather stripping would later address for much more money. Many families made new draft stoppers annually, filling them with that year's worn clothing scraps, creating both insulation and a use for otherwise useless textiles. Sewing up small holes in clothes. The darning egg and needle were essential tools when clothes were expensive and expected to last. Mothers spent evenings mending small holes before they became big problems. Socks were darned repeatedly, with some families joking about socks that were more darn than original. Elbows were reinforced with patches, knees were double-layered before they wore through. This wasn't considered poverty, but responsibility. A new pair of work pants cost $3 in 1950, a day's wages for many workers. Keeping them mended for an extra year meant real savings. The skill was taught to daughters as essential knowledge. They learned various stitches for different repairs: blanket stitch for edges, running stitch for seams, darning weave for holes. Patches became decorative elements, especially on children's clothes where cute appliques covered damage. Some mothers got creative, embroidering flowers around mended areas or using contrasting thread to make repairs features rather than flaws. This mending culture meant clothes lasted decades rather than seasons. Wedding dresses were worn by multiple generations. Work clothes survived entire careers, and children's clothes were passed through multiple families, carefully mended at each stage. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. If you enjoyed exploring these 25 forgotten household hacks, give it a like and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe.